Good afternoon, Frank.
Good afternoon, Professor Spooner.
It's been several weeks since we last talked, and a lot has happened in the world since then, and especially in the last couple of weeks, which has made me think that in the 1930s and 40s, we were offered two visions of the future. One was the Brave New World, which came out first, and then after the Second World War, we got a completely different vision, which was 1984, in which the world was divided up into three opposing camps, of which two were always allied against the other one, but the alliance kept shifting. And the events over the last week or so have made me think that if one's a pessimist, one could start thinking that maybe that's what's going to happen, that the world is essentially divided now between the Chinese, the Americans, and Islamic civilization. And if things developed in a particular way, then these could become three opposing camps. And there's all sorts of signs that that could perhaps happen if you're willing to look on the bleak side of things. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you think that's all nonsense, and there's all sorts of reasons why the divisions could never become distinct enough because there's so much intermingling already, then the other possibility is that the inequalities have become so gross everywhere in the world, both between countries, between classes within countries, between ethnic communities and so on, that we'll finish up as alphas, betas, gammas, deltas, and epsilons like Brave New World.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it. I think that if you do look at those three blocks that you referenced, the Chinese, the Islamists, and the Americans, and then look at the things that have been happening within each of those blocks, just in order, you're looking at the ongoing Chinese political / economic difficulties that are occurring as we speak. You look at the American presidential election, and you look at the current uprising in the Islamic world about this video produced by a Coptic group based apparently in Los Angeles. And what's very interesting to me is the speed and proliferation of the events respective to each of the three groups, in having been disseminated not only throughout those three groups vertically, but also horizontally. All right. I mean, I don't think there are many people who are paying attention in the non-Chinese world who are not aware of what's going on with Bo Xilai perhaps now being fingered and indicated that he's going to be brought in front of a tribunal for the actions of his wife. I think there are very few people in the non-Chinese world who do not possess an awareness of the hard bump that the Chinese economy is hitting. And then, broadly speaking, just about everybody in China is aware of both of those things. It's at the point now where you cannot even go on to the Chinese version of Google, Baidu I think it is, and you can't put the word in vice president, or you get a censor screen popping back up. This was back when Li Jinping had disappeared for about 12 days. Yeah. Before he reappeared the other day with Panetta.
With a sore back.
With a sore back, indeed. And then you look at what's happening in the American election, some of the comments that Romney's making, specifically about the Palestinians, not to mention the 47% of the people in the United States who's apparently written off. If it wasn't for the fact that there was all this other turmoil going on in the Arab world right now, those comments could very well be prompting the similar kind of demonstrations in front of American facilities overseas. And then you look at what's going on in the Arab world itself now. I mean, I certainly did not know, as did not most Americans, have any inkling that a film had been produced by Coptic Christians who are immigrants or refugees in the United States. I still haven't seen the film. I've only read about the film in news reports. I am wondering whether or not many or any of the people that are throwing stones or killing ambassadors or doing whatever they're doing in the Arab world have even seen the film. But it's simply the infectious incitement kind of spread on a viral manner that it's very impressive between each of the event sets within the respective three blocks you mentioned.
Yes, and it's amazing that it's obviously reminiscent of what happened in 1989. that I think Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses came out in the fall of 1988, and in early 1989, somebody told Khomeini, and Khomeini issued a fatwa, which still not clear whether it was a real fatwa or not. But then nobody had read the book. But it created, well, the first crisis of that type in the modern world. But it's very similar to the current crisis. It's just that this has happened much quicker, instantaneously. There wasn't a delay between the making of the first appearance of the film and the eventual reaction against it. But I don't know whether you've noticed that in the New Yorker this week, there's a long article by Salman Rushdie, purely coincidental, one assumes, reviewing his whole experience, which is a very interesting and well-written article, which tells us a lot of things that I don't think any of us knew at that time. And I don't think that Khamenei in Iran, Khomeini's current successor, reads the New Yorker, but he actually entered this scene a couple of days ago and said, if only we killed Salman Rushdie in 1989, this wouldn't have happened.
Sure. Oh, yes, of course. That's logical. I have not read the article yet. I will read it this weekend, but there was an interview with Rushdie, I believe, in the New York Times yesterday. Rushdie has come out with a new book. One of the two words in the title is Anton. I don't remember the first word. He's took the names of the first name and the surname of two of his favorite authors, and the book is written in the third person, and it describes him, I believe, as a fictitious him. It's not him by name, of a man who had lived under the edict of the fatwa for 10 years, and the things he had to go through. I believe from the interview he went through 3 marriages. Successive relocations at the hands of Special Branch trying to keep him safe until the fatwa was finally lifted. And the last question of the interview, yeah, it was lifted. It was lifted about 4 years ago. It was officially lifted. And the last question that the interviewer asked was, if you had to do this all again, what would you do? And he said, I would never have given up. I would have stayed at home. And I would have told Special Branch that they have to protect me. I would not have lived in a succession of safe houses around Britain. But it's neither here nor there, I suppose. I guess it's just a question of once again, it's unseemly and unthinkable to me as a citizen in the West, as Rushdie is, that you could be working on something on your home word processor unit and produce a book that would have the forces of a sovereign state swear that they were going to come and kill you wherever you may be. I mean, I mean, and I know it's historical, it happened a long time ago, but that's not good. It's talk about renegade behavior.
Well, certainly for those of us who make a living writing things about other parts of the world, it makes wonder how careful we need to be about what we say. But I think that one way to react to this is, aren't nation states becoming less important as globalization progresses? And if they are, then what's going to take their place? Perhaps confessional communities, which might be worse, but maybe other things.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you look at the diminishing importance of nation states within the context of the set of events in the 3 blocks that you mentioned, and I will admit that I filled in the blanks and put in the event set, but take the easiest one to identify, the event set associated in the Islamic world over the release of the Coptic-produced film. I can clearly see there that the erosion of nation-state authority and boundaries is pretty clear.
Well, I mean, when this was first suggested in the 90s, it was said that no, nation states can't disappear because we have no other way of creating infrastructure. Now, in fact, nation states don't create infrastructure very well anymore because all the American bridges are all falling down because Obama can't get the Republicans to agree to put money into rebuilding them. And in places like India, corporations are building infrastructure where it suits them because the government isn't doing it. So maybe this problem is sorting itself out, and it will be difficult for nation states to continue to be the major players that they've been in the last 50 years since it was decided to set up the United Nations in such a way that it depended upon nation states. And maybe the Palestinians won't need a nation state anymore because they won't be important. However, the big question is what's going to take the place of it. And it seems to me that one thing that keeps on happening is that there is more and more interaction, group interaction of more and more complex types in different parts of the world that are superseding nation states. That Saskia Sassen introduced the idea of the global city for us, which is very useful because it gives us an easy way of talking about the fact that cities are now more significant nodes of globalizing interaction than actual nation states are. Nation states protect their borders and are hopeless keeping people either in or out. Whereas global cities are within nation states but thrive on moving people back and forth between cities. The number of people moving around to different types of gathering that bring closer together what's going on in bigger and bigger urban conurbations is the word I like.
Right.
They're overflowing urban boundaries is increasing all the time, becoming much more complex. But I also think that the confessional communities are going to break down as well, so they're not going to replace. I don't think it's possible in the future that there will be any big blocks such as George Orwell predicted. I think we're going through a phase now which is the last phase of world history where that will appear to be one of the possibilities.
Well, I agree with that. In fact, I think if you could have submitted to Orwell the reality that is today, that a group of lightly financed individuals could create an internet-based film, all right, that's certainly not going to play in any movie theaters, that is released, I believe, as a video on YouTube, that could have caused the reaction that we've seen in the Islamic world. At no cost, and instantaneously, he would have viewed that as fantastical. That would not have been something that he could have imagined. And frankly, nothing I could have imagined even 15 years ago. So it's like almost it's like something's out of the bottle. I mean, it can never be put back in, and it's sort of we have often talked about the kind of accelerant effect that social media has and things like that, but I think what we've overlooked is that just the basic infrastructural superhighway of the internet and what it's providing, and the kind of grassroots infection that it's able to reach, even with these people who are throwing stones and firebombs at American schools overseas, without ever having seen the movie, having been conveyed the message by word of mouth by others who still haven't seen the movie, who in turn received the message by word of mouth. I mean, it's like a wildfire that just can't stop, and it goes through boundaries, it goes through ethnic groups, it goes through geographical areas, it goes through time and space, and it's like a light beam.
But for the time being, the Chinese are all demonstrating against the Japanese.
Oh, yes.
The Muslims are all demonstrating against the West.
Yes.
And what are we doing? I'm not sure. But we're
demonstrating against each other.
To Romney putting down the Muslims.
Right.
So, but I think that this is the last gasp of that of opinions on that scale, because the amount of intermingling between Chinese and other ways of seeing the world, but certainly between Western and other ways of seeing the world, and I think to an increasing extent between Muslims and other ways of seeing the world is increasing. And I understand that today there were big demonstrations in Islamabad, in Pakistan, and religious leaders came and told the people to shut up.
Mm-hmm. I saw that. I saw that headline.
So this enables me to finish off our discussion this week on an optimistic note, which I like to do, to start off with pessimism and show that the pessimism is really not valid and that there's room for optimism after all. But the trouble is that if you have an optimistic view of the way things are going to develop in the next 50 years, then you're opening up possibilities of total uncertainty, and that's what people don't like. And that's why people hang on to these old identities, because they provide security. But I think we're growing out of the situation where we can hold on to that security, when we're gradually getting accustomed more and more to the possibility of living without it and living with uncertainty.
Well, I would agree with that. I mean, if you're one of the tens of thousands of Japanese nationals living in China and being subjected to the 85 demonstrations in 85 different cities in China yesterday against Japanese business interests over 3 or 4 islands that are like each half the size of the Penn campus. I mean, come on. I mean, all of a sudden you're being subjected to forces you never even conceived of before. I mean, you just don't know what's around the corner. You can't prepare. It's amazing. And the old boundaries are completely eroded, and there is no kind of sustenance or ability or buffer zone for people. I'm pessimistic today.
Well, there'll be a lot of exciting things happening in the current week, I'm sure, for us to talk about next week.
Good. All right. Well, thank you, Professor Spooner.
See you then.
All right. Bye.